Welcome to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. It's 2 in the morning on the East Coast of the United States. I have no idea what time it is down and under, but it is time for Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. So I hope you have your tinfoil hat all made and cinched down tight over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Hello and welcome to Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on WZZR, coming to you from Australia, the land down under, for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. It's home to fresh, unadulterated ideas and conversations in the chat room, and a place to get your mark. This is show number 472, 270 and 400. Oh my God. Catch us on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace Tabletop Digital Radio. Just before we are on, Solaris was on, and she had an awesome show. She's always on before us, which is great. And if you missed it, she was talking to Vivian Powell, psychic medium and paranormal investigator, I want to say. I listened to part of the show, which is great. And it was really something I recommend. So if you did miss it, you can go ahead and subscribe to the Freedom Slips Archives. That's right. Freedom Slips Archives. It's $5 a month. What are you going to get for $5 a month these days? Can't even buy a t-shirt for that. Eh? Let alone, well, maybe a coffee and a muffin. Actually, not even a muffin. No, it's just a coffee. Anyway, go and subscribe. $5 a month. And check out her shows. Check out our shows. Check out all the hosts' shows. Yes, that's what $5 will buy you. But like I said, it was really interesting to listen to half an hour. I think I caught about the last half hour. So and Solaris herself is an awesome interviewee. She's a producer. She's a documentary maker. She's a published author. She's I think she's practicing Wiccan as well. I don't want to say the wrong thing, Solaris, but I think you are, which is awesome. It's the whole spectrum of what you find here at Revolution Radio. Now, without further ado, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I am today. It's the Camaragal people, because I'm in Crow's Nest in Sydney. Not the Darug people, which I normally have, because I'm not at home today, which is also the reason I'm not in the chat room. But I'll talk about it in a second. And with that, I would like to thank, to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. And if Dave were here, he would do it by acknowledging the dark and young people up in Narara, Central Coast, where he lives. But he's unfortunately not able to join us today. He is unavoidably detained. No, nothing serious. He's all good. It's a family function. And look, we've all been there. I hope he's got a great time. This is, obviously celebrating Easter. It means something else to everybody. I'll talk about that in a second as well. But I do hope that he's having a good time with his family there. And I would like to shout out to all of his family, his two lovely daughters, his partner, and his in-laws with whom he's celebrating today. All right. So, yes, this is show number 471. 471. That means 29 shows. 29 shows. It's about half a year, let's say. In 6 months' time, we'll be at show number 500. I'm not sure what the format of that will be. Rest assured, though, we'll come up with something. In the first hour, I'll be looking at some of the news and some of the overarching themes that drive this particular show, the Shiny Side Out. And in the second hour, we're going to talk in some depth about biological warfare. We're going to talk about the suspicious deaths of 100 microbiologists over the last few years, a couple of decades, I want to say, but a couple of decades here. And we're going to do that in light of what we know about what I like to call pandemic that's unfolding, or has been unfolding, well, almost a year and a half now, right? If you think about it. And I do believe it is a pandemic, and I'll get to that in a second as well. But as you know, this will probably take a while to get through. The show notes that we have for this particular show cycle, how many pages? Yes, 58 pages, A4. It's been significantly updated because we ran it before as show number 128. Sorry, 127, 128, and 129. So that was quite a while ago. So I want to say about probably 7, 8 years ago, we ran it first. And then we ran it again at 411, which was the start of last year, when the COVID-19 had just started to unfold. And you'll see some of the contrasts in numbers and in knowledge that we will bring out here as well, with the notes that we still have from last time, but we have significantly extended those notes. And then, of course, last week 471, and then this week 472. So 270 and 400. Sorry, did I say 471 before? This is show number 472. 270 and 400. But yeah, so we're going to talk about that in some detail. We're going to look at what biological warfare actually means, right? How is it defined? And then we'll look at the Wuhan coronavirus. But we look at it from the lens as of 2010. Yeah, that's how long ago it actually started, believe it or not. But what's been happening in the world, you ask? And that's a good question. First up, though, I have to apologize. I am not in the chat room. I am on a different machine today. And for some reason, when I tried to log into the chat room, it doesn't accept my password. So I got a password reset. I sent out by 𝐶hatC, which is the chat room software. It hasn't come back to me yet. So I do apologize for not being there. I will check my email intermittently to see if, in fact, 𝐶hatC has sent me through no, they haven't, not yet, a code to unlock my my account. But if anybody wanted to chat with me, I'm on Skype. So any of the administrators, for the station, you can ping me on Skype if you like. That's absolutely not a problem. And I'm hoping the sound is coming through loud and clear. Right. So what's been happening? What's been happening is everything. So right now we're at a critical juncture in human history, and we have been, well, don't think of junctures as a singular nexus, a singular point in space, right? A juncture in human history is usually a period of time. And in our particular case, it's probably the last 20 years that have been hypercritical, right? And that hasn't really stopped. And then we've just stepped it up another notch with the advent of the virus, right? And that's what I'm going to call it the virus. Do I think it was a planned action? I'm now convinced it was. Right now, I'm convinced. Initially, I thought, it could be coincidence. But all the things that this virus is, the way it mutates, the way it attacks us, the way it leaves us crippled, even when we get over it, has me thinking that it is highly unlikely that this is a naturally occurring phenomenon. I know people think I'm crazy. That's okay. It doesn't matter. It's a shiny set out, by the way, right? So I'm entitled to a little nuttiness. But I do believe, and for good reason, that this is not a coincidental event. Nor will it, in fact, be done and over with quickly either. I've been looking at some of the numbers. Again, we get our numbers from different sources. I personally look at the Worldometer, which collates a whole bunch of different data sources from around the world. The overall infections, and you can only know this when people are tested, right? You only know if people are infected if they're tested. So the overall infections had gone down in the month of March significantly, and they spiked up toward the end of March yet again. In fact, to quite high heights, if you will. We had gotten down to below 500,000 a day, and now we're right up back to 700,000 a day of new infections, and same with the death rate. It dropped significantly during March, and then it spiked again significantly, toward the end of March and now through April. So that's the thing, even with the vaccines in place. But make no mistake, the vast majority of the human population has not got access to a vaccine. Now, vaccine, should we take it? Should we take the vaccine? Should we take the vaccine? That's entirely up to you. I have no opinion that I can give you for you. I know what I will do, and that's my choice. As far as you're concerned, you must make up your own mind as to what you want to know. I do think that the Pfizer vaccine is the better vaccine if you're inclined to take the vaccine. I also believe that the AstraZeneca is probably not quite as safe or efficacious. As we know, when it's not quite as efficacious, and that's okay. That's all right. But it is also not a silver bullet. None of the vaccines are. What do I mean by that? So people think that once you get the vaccination, once you're vaccinated, then you're safe. Well, you're safer, right? Depending on how efficacious it is, be it 60%, 70%, 90% in the case of the Pfizer vaccine, So you probably will not get as sick. You can still get infected, just to be clear. And in fact, a lot of people are infected and they never show any symptoms, right? This is a really interesting kind of virus. But let's say you are vaccinated and it's 90% efficacious, chances are you won't get as sick, and you probably will not die, right? You probably won't have to be on a respirator either. Does that mean you can't infect anybody else? No, that's not what it means at all. You can still be infected, even if you're vaccinated, and you might have a very mild case or no symptoms at all. You can still infect other people. Okay, a vaccine is not a silver bullet. Okay, it's not a cure. We don't have a cure yet. And everybody's talking about herd immunity. Now, if you get people vaccinated, then we should have herd immunity. We know we don't. How do we know this? Recently, well, in the last few months, something interesting happened in the Brazilian city of Manaus. Manaus is the second biggest, I think, city in Brazil. So it's massive. It's a huge metropolis. It's in the rainforest. So it's an inland city. And the estimation that was made by the medical professionals with regards to Manaus stated that about 80% of the people, or even higher, had contracted the SARS-CoV-2 virus in Manaus. So about 80% of the population had been exposed and infected by the virus. Now, that is also the magical number for herd immunity. Well, I mean, nothing is perfect, nothing is ever certain, but most medical scientists, medical researchers, medical doctors will tell you that at 80% of an infected population, we can now assume that we have achieved herd immunity. That's usually holds true for most diseases, and not it seems for SARS-CoV-2, because they had another spike after more than 80% had been infected, and they're going through a massive spike right now, and both in infection and death rates. And Brazil is, in fact, in a horrendous state at the moment. The medical professionals tell us that their health system is close to collapse, etc., etc. It's now got the again, these are official figures, right? So you can take it or leave it, but they now have the second highest death rate, and also the second highest infection rate in the world. Oddly enough, Mexico. I saw an article, and it said that Mexico had to revise its numbers of deaths upwards as well, but I haven't seen that come through in any of the statistics. Yeah. But my point here is that the vaccine will probably help you if you so choose to take it. Never mind the side effects, because there are side effects, because these vaccines were rushed through production. Vaccines are not inherently safe at the best of times. Okay. No, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And yes, when I was a child, I got all my vaccines in Germany for all kinds of things. I also had my children vaccinated, and I'm vaccinating my youngest. Well, not me. I'm getting him vaccinated. Because if you don't, you can't go to school. It's that simple in Australia. So there's not much of a choice. But they're not inherently safe. Okay. Vaccines, while not positively linked to negative health outcomes, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence which would suggest that there are indeed negative side effects for a small percentage of the population. So the medical establishment looks at that and goes, okay, so a few people will have negative and even sometimes fatal results from vaccines, but the vast majority of people, they'll be okay and they won't get sick. They won't get sick with whatever, polio or smallpox or whatever it might be, right? And that's then, where you make a decision that is completely utilitarian. And you say, okay, that's the number of people that we're saving. That's the number of people that's going to be negatively affected. Okay, we're going to go with the vaccine. It's that simple. It's like battlefield triage, right? You make a call and then you stick with it. And to be honest with you, if I were in a similar situation, I'd probably make the same call. Okay, the greater good, if you will. But make no mistake, vaccines are not inherently safe. Okay, there can be side effects if you're not careful, and because these vaccines have been rushed through, unprecedentedly so, the side effects should also be much higher than in normal vaccines. And we're seeing some of these side effects now, blood clotting, etc., etc. And everybody says, oh yeah, but the incidences of blood clotting are much smaller than they are, for the non-vaccinated population. Okay, I get that. You can make these statistical comparisons. So maybe in the overall population of 1 million people, 5% get blood clots, for argument's sake, right? 5% of people. And in the vaccinated population of 1 million, only 3% get blood clots. Okay, for argument's sake. So those are about the numbers. Okay, but what I want to know is this, though, and this is really where you need to look at the detail. Of the people that were vaccinated, are these the people that are in a group that would get blood clots anyway? Or are these people that would be highly unlikely to ever get blood clots? So there could be a causal link between the vaccine and blood clots. You understand where I'm getting with the comparison here? So yes, the population in general will get blood clots. People in the population get blood clots all the time. It happens, right? Thrombosis or even aneurysms, etc., etc. I mean, these are all blood clot related conditions. But my question is, of all the people that were vaccinated, the ones that did get the blood clots, are they the ones that would have gotten them anyway? Right? You with me? Or are they so outside the range of blood clot likelihood that we really have to look at this and go, hey, hang on, this is something we need to investigate. And my gut feel here is, because it has been halted in a number of countries, is that these people that are getting the clots are in fact not people that normally get them. I don't have any evidence for that, but because, like I said, the rollout of AstraZeneca has been halted in some countries, I would say that is probably the case. Okay, so much to the current health situation of the planet. It's not over by a long shot. It's not over by a long shot. Not over by a long shot. Second point is, we all remember that recently there's this massive, cargo ship blocked the Suez Canal, right? Why is Mackie talking about that? Because it's all about being prepared. So the pandemic should have taught us that we should be prepared and not just, having enough toilet paper. We should have enough stuff at home, right, to see us through a period of time. And this is becoming increasingly more likely, right? I mean, we're building these big ships, and we've got two major trade routes in the world that are being used, massively, I want to say. It's the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. If you block them, right, if something happens, if like this time a ship got stuck in it, it's no one's fault, the wind blew it, of course, and then it just got wedged in the mud of the bank, because the ship was as long as the canal is wide. This is a 400-meter long ship, and the canal is 400 meters wide. And it's like a perfect bottle stop, if you will, right? So that can happen. But what happens then is that supply chains will be disrupted. And again, it didn't take much, right? I mean, hundreds and hundreds of ships, because every day about 50 ships go through the Suez Canal. Hundreds of ships were banking up, and the only alternative really was to go around Cape Horn, which is around the tip of Africa, which adds another 9 odd days, and significant cost to the shipping. Between 9 days and 2 weeks, really, right? 9 to 14 days, depending on your ship and speed, etc., and depending, of course, where you're going as well. So you're cutting 2 weeks through your travel time if you take the Suez Canal. So goods might be in short supply, goods might become more expensive, etc., right? But what we're also seeing are much more severe natural events than ever before. That we've never experienced fires and I said this last week, I think, we've never experienced fires like this, like we did in 2019 and then the beginning of 2020. Globally, the world was on fire. We've never seen that. Now we're seeing extreme weather events all over the world. Okay, social unrest, the Black Lives Matters movement, right? I mean, and I'm really following this trial quite closely, because to look at, I don't want to preempt any judgment here, right? But God help us all if that cop doesn't get convicted. Okay, I mean, that would just be a horrendous outcome, irrespective of anything else. Like I said, I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, but I'm telling you, you think Rodney King was bad? You wait what happens if this cop gets acquitted. But my point here is, so all these things are happening, right? Social, political, natural. events that could leave us stranded or cut off. Like we saw in Australia just recently. It's the worst flooding we've seen in living memory on the eastern seaboard. The worst. The entire houses that were just that floated down the river. Livestock, lost. It was truly horrendous. People did die as well in the floods. They were swept away in floodwaters, drowned, and so forth. And they were cut off for days. So they had to rely on what they had. And what was worse, in a lot of these outlying areas in Australia, in what we'd like to call the bush, sort of the I guess the more rural areas, there are a lot of septic tanks that are used for toilet purposes, if you will, right? All the plumbing, etc. Irrigation isn't quite what it should be, but they all overflowed, contaminating the groundwater and contaminating, well, pretty much the flood waters as well, which brings the risk of disease. You don't have any potable water. So, I mean, look at yourself. What is your water situation? You know the rule of 3, right? 3, 3, 3. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. That's what they say, roughly. I mean, thereabouts. I mean, people are different, but let's take that as a rule of thumb. I mean, where you are, is the potable water secure? Is it safe? Do you have access to it? What would happen in a flooding event when septic tanks are overflowing? Do you have any potable water at that point? Is there any drinking water for you? What about the grey water, right? Do you have any water at home? Any drinking water you can store? Do you have a water tank, right? What about your neighbors? And how far are you from a viable source of water should things go south? Right, that's the first thing. Second, food. Do you have enough food at home? In your cupboard, in your pantry, in your storm cellar, whatever it might be? Do you? Well, the answer is probably not. If you do, great. And if you listen to this show, you probably do. But, it doesn't have to be hard. I mean, a few cans. Have enough food to last you a month or two. That's my suggestion, right? A month or two. And mostly canned goods, dry goods, right? Just enough to live and survive, and have equipment that you can cook on fire with. Because electricity and gas might be out. What are you going to do, right? Get pots and pans that you can put on an open fire, or on your barbecue if you've got natural fuel there, right? Cast iron is great. Cooks on anything. You can even cook it inside the earth, right? Like you might see on some of the islands, is it luau? I think it's a luau when they do a whole pig underground, right? But these are all things you have to consider, right? Air, water, and food. And then, of course, shelter and community. That's the next one. Because you can survive on your own for a while. You can, even for months on end, you can survive on your own. But if things really go south, then you need a community to survive. You need I don't know, a stable environment for yourself, for your family, for your friends, right? And if you've got your family close, awesome. If you've got your friends close, great. I believe that smaller communities, villages, etc., have a much better chance of surviving any kind of catastrophic event than any of the major cities. The major cities, they're going to eat each other. It's just completely unsustainable. If something went down, supply chains were broken, and there was no food coming in, no water coming in, social order breaks down. Maybe the police breaks down. There's no central government or even local or state government in place anymore. Everyone for himself. The cities will just collapse. It's not in the nature of cities to survive things like that. They need supplies to come in from the outside. I mean, that's why agriculture and domestication of animals was invented, to make cities viable. Without any of that, cities are not viable. They're simply not viable. So again, something to think about, I guess. What else is happening though in the world? Well, another interesting thing, and Dave actually brought it up, and I do want to quickly spend some time on it here as well. There's an interesting development around the Ukraine and Russia. So Russia is sending troops into the Ukraine. And, it's now in the mainstream. Dave mentioned it well before it hit the mainstream, so his contacts told him this from the Daily Mail here. I'll just share with you what it says here. Russia today vowed to take extra measures if NATO sends forces to Ukraine after the Kremlin dispatched 4,000 troops to the disputed border with its neighbor. So we'll see. The United States, on the other hand, pledged its unwavering support to Ukraine on Thursday, which was, just before Good Friday, as defense officials said they were aware of thousands of troops newly deployed to the separatist Donbas territory, which is controlled by pro-Moscow factions. Something going to happen there? Well, probably, maybe. Is NATO going to step in if Russia truly sent troops into the Ukraine? Well, this is a really interesting question, and I'll tell you why. Because overnight, the Ukraine became a nuclear power, right? When the Soviet Union collapsed. So I don't know if Russia should invade Ukraine. I don't know if that'd be in Russia's best interest, because the Ukraine actually can fight back if they really had to. And that's why NATO is quite interested in the Ukraine and pulling them across to their camp, even though I don't really know what that camp looks like anymore. It's all getting very blurry. When I grew up, that was during the Cold War, 60s, 70s, 80s. Everybody knew exactly where they stood. Right? You had to be a moron not to understand what world politics looked like. But these days, I have no idea. And there was the Iron Curtain, and there's Eastern Bloc over there. A lot of proxy wars between America and China, America and the USSR. Vietnam was a proxy war. Afghanistan was a proxy war. There were numerous conflicts in Africa that were proxy wars. The conflicts in the Middle East were proxy wars as well. And believe it or not, initially it was Egypt who was courted by both the USSR and the USA, not Israel. Not Israel. Israel only became interesting to the West and I guess to the East after the Six-Day War, where they showed the world, yeah, we can defend ourselves, thank you very much. And it was only then that the balance of power shifted. Before that, America was very much trying to get Egypt on its side. And same with the USSR trying to get Egypt. Because Egypt was the biggest military power until they got their proverbials handed to them by the Israelis in the Six-Day War, like I said. But yeah, so there's interesting developments there. And I think we're going to see more of that. As the global arena is destabilizing, I think we will see more and more opportunism of either separation, a la the Basque country, or any separatist movements. So Scotland, for argument's sake. I mean, hey, Texas could move. Who knows? And also nation-state players. We can see more border skirmishes. Probably India, China. And I would say the Kashmir region as well, and with Pakistan and India. Probably other regions as well. Certainly the South China Sea. That's definitely one. Taiwan, 100%. Hong Kong, it's a no-brainer. But there are other territories as well, certainly in Africa, we're going to see a lot more unrest. And then we're going to see, I believe we will see splintering of nations, right? I mean, where once we had unified large nations, I think we're going to see that splinter down to smaller nation states, simply because of the overall global situation, both from a natural disasters point of view as well as political uncertainty. And I think people will find smaller nation states easier to understand and easier to hold together. Right? So I think we're going to see a lot of splitting of countries there. And other countries, of course, take the opportunity to annex other countries yet again. So like Russia and the Ukraine. So it's going to swing both ways. The powerful nations, such as Russia, such as China, are going to gobble up smaller component parts, like maybe parts that they used to have. Like, I mean, Taiwan, for all intents and purposes, is a part of China, right? I mean, there's only a few nations in the world that have recognized Taiwan as an independent state, and the UN hasn't. So the United Nations says, no. It's got a special member status. It's really strange. But for all intents and purposes, Taiwan is a part of China. Hong Kong is a part of China. They were promised a one country, two system. That clearly is not the case anymore. It's one country, one system. And that's unfortunate, because I really liked Hong Kong and I liked going there. Now I'm not too sure if I'll ever go back. But look, we are seeing this development, right? Where we're seeing these nations that, and Ukraine was part of the USSR, right, back in the day. So we can see these countries that wish to bring back what they had, their former glory, and this is the opportunity to do it, because there is no clear global leader, right? You can say whatever you like about Donald Trump, but he stepped away from being a global cop actively. He extracted America from global politics as a leader, if you will. Now, but before you poo-poo Donald Trump, realize that he is in good company. Okay, President Monroe, President Woodrow Wilson, they both believed that America should just look after its own affairs. The Monroe Doctrine said, America for Americans, let the Europeans fight their own wars. Woodrow Wilson, after World War I, did not join the League of Nations deliberately because, I don't want to deal with these Europeans. Let them, do their own thing. Okay, so Donald Trump is just a continuation of that American centrist view. Okay, before you start throwing eggs at the guy. And there's a good reason for it as well. I mean, America was a lot more prosperous when it wasn't a global cop. Okay, I mean, having troops out there in the world, everywhere, and fleets, Pacific Fleet, Atlantic Fleet, etc., 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 that costs a lot of money. That costs a lot of money. And people have gotten to the point now, because obviously, it's been going on for well over 60 years, since the end of World War II. They've gotten so used to America being, global cop that it's very hard to imagine another world. But prior to World War II, it was the British, really, right, that had that role with, with the Commonwealth Empire. Not unchallenged, but certainly dominant. Okay, so it's everything shifts and changes, and we're just living through one of those changes. It helps to understand world history and the interconnectedness of things, and what all these ambitions really mean from a nation-state point of view. Because the League of Nations, which was then superseded by the United Nations, is a completely anomalous institution. It has no right to exist. I mean, that's harsh, but nation-states exist in a state of anarchy. That's it, state of anarchy. There's no overall, even today with the UN or the the World Court or whatever you want to call it, there's no governing body globally that says you have to do this, this, and this, and nobody would listen to it either. Why would you? How are you going to enforce any of this? You can't. The Hague, completely toothless. I mean, if you happen to lose a war to the United States, for example, and you like Milosevic, Slobodan, poor guy did, then he can put you in front of the Hague, charge you with war crimes and all kinds of things, right? But that's because the Americans want to do it, or the Russians might want to do it, or the Chinese might want to do it. But if Cameroon wanted to do it, I say good luck to you. I mean, as far as I know, I believe that Cheney and Kissinger even, and maybe some other members of the American political elite, they are still, I think they're still under indictment by some nations in the international court. Not that they're ever going to see. You're never going to see Kissinger in the in the dock. That's not going to happen, right? But if we were playing by those rules, then he should be there, right? For the things he did, and Cheney and Rumsfeld similarly. But that's not going to happen. So yeah, just to be clear, the nation-state arena is an arena of complete anarchy and self-interest. Sometimes interests align. That's great. Sometimes they don't. At which point you find nations that are in conflict with each other. But one thing that I can tell you right now, right? And so all of that theater that we see, nation states and wars, the geopolitical grand game. And I read the book by Brzezinski, The Grand Chessboard, where he this was decades ago he wrote it, where he outlined the plan of the neocons under the Bush administration. It was out. It's right there. It's right there. It's like you should really start reading politicians' books. Nobody read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Not a single person. Oh, it's not true. A lot of people didn't read it. But if you had read it, you'd know exactly what would happen. It was all there. He laid it out in quite minute detail, right? Same with the Grand Chessboard and Brzezinski. Sorry, it's a hard name to pronounce. So it's not like it's a secret. It was critical that the United States get control of Central Asia. That was a critical element of the grand design of geopolitics. Very, very important. I mean, the Pacific Atlantic fleets are... If America didn't have these fleets, America wouldn't be in the position it is today, in the power position globally speaking. Right? It needs these fleets because they're aircraft carrier battle fleets, right? Pacific and Atlantic. If they didn't have those, there goes the American advantage, and power for that matter. And similarly, it was very important for all the stands, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, etc., to accept American bases. Right, or American influence at the very least, because that's where a lot of the natural resources are. forget oil. We talk about natural gas here, other things as well, but especially natural gas, and you can pump it quite easily through through the Persian Gulf, and then out into the world. And that's why the USSR wanted Afghanistan. The USSR has one winter unfrozen port in the Black Sea. That's it. All the other ports it has are frozen in winter. It's a very bad strategic disadvantage. And to add insult to injury, the Black Sea port is controlled. Well, controlled is too much to say, but it's controlled by NATO. Why is that? Because in order to leave the Black Sea, you have to go through the Bosporus, and the Bosporus is owned by Turkey, which is a NATO member. So it's a very narrow strait that connects Asia and Europe. And in order to get from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean, you have to pass, like I said, through the straits of the Bosporus. And if NATO shuts it down, that's it. Russia, you can't access the oceans, right? Unless you break up all the ice ports and get icebreakers and get your fleets out. That takes forever. I mean, submarines might be able to get through, right? And having access to the Persian Gulf, and then first conquering Afghanistan and then getting access to the Persian Gulf, or even having Vietnam with a freshwater port would have been instrumental in securing those ports for the USSR. Those are really, I mean, people don't just go to war to spread their ideology. I mean, who cares if you're communist or capitalist or whatever? It doesn't matter. And I'll talk about that in a second. What matters is your geopolitical advantage, right? What kind of access do you have to what resources? How can you move these resources around? What if there's a conflict? How quickly can you deploy troops, right? And how many troops can you deploy? Because you can bomb a country until the cows come home. If you can't put down ground forces, you cannot conquer that country. Afghanistan is completely unconquerable. You can't conquer it. You can bomb it and bomb it and bomb it as much as you like. You can't conquer it because you can't put the ground forces down to hold it. Supply chain is a nightmare. The country is completely rugged. And it's tough to get. I mean, you have to airlift things in and out. I mean, the mountain passes, you blow them up, it's done. It's like Switzerland. All Switzerland has to do is blow up 3 or 4 mountain passes, and you can't get any land armies in unless you airdrop them in, right? And that has its own drawbacks and logistical nightmares attached to it, right? So mountainous nations are very hard to conquer and hold. Not impossible, but very, very hard. And so all of these things matter, right? And you need to understand that, because it's not about communism versus capitalism. Who cares? It's about the elites playing chess, okay? In World War I keep saying it all the time, I know, but the Kaiser and the Tsar and the British King were first cousins. You put them next to each other, you'd think they're brothers, okay? Because they're all the same bloodline, okay? And that's the people that you see. That's the elite that you see. They don't care, not really, right? Not about the people. They care about their own bloodlines and staying in power. They want to maintain the status quo. And once in a while, you have to have a war, right? To keep the population under check, don't make sure those uppity revolutionaries or whatever they are, they don't get the upper hand. Right? And for hundreds of years, thousands of years even, that was the game in town. That was the most important game in town, including, religion. So, the crown, as it were, whichever crown it was, and the frock, whichever frock it was, or turban or whatever the hell, they would work hand in hand to keep the population under control. That's what they did, right? That has changed now in recent times, but it's still under control, simply because the actual elite, I'm not talking about the bloodlines here, the royalties, who cares about them? I'm talking about the actual people in power, which you never see, and which are probably a very smaller number. That goes again back talking about to the hypothesis, where I believe very firmly that the people that hold the power in the world, actual power, are probably less than 20 or 30 entities. And I say entities because I believe these are very long-lived entities. Human, initially, I think, they started out, and for all intents and purposes still look it. But they've lived such a long time, and they've achieved practical immortality or extreme longevity. I mean, practical immortality is hard because accidents happen, right? And people will die eventually of something. But I do believe that these entities are extremely long-lived, and they don't really care what happens, anywhere. To be honest with you, it's really quite funny. There's no concern except for themselves. Okay, we're just cattle, livestock. I don't want to go into that too much, but just again, if you're interested in this kind of thing, listen to the hypothesis. Every 100 shows, we bring it out. We're going to have a massive expose for show number 500, which is coming up in about half a year's time. We're going to talk about the hypothesis in quite some detail. I'm going to bring it together a lot more coherently, but it'll go over easily 5 or 6 shows, 5 or 6 Sundays, because there's so much information now, and it's all coming together. Over the last 10 years, Dave and I have been fortunate enough to be able to research short topics, for Revolution Radio here, for the Shiny Side Out. And while we were quite au fait with most of the material that we present, we were able to get a lot more depth and detail in our research. And we have, I don't know, I want to say maybe 5,000-6,000 pages of research that we've accumulated over the years. Some of it I can't find anymore, so I'm lucky I have it. And we're also lucky enough to have talked to a number of really great researchers. And unfortunately, some of the interviews we lost. My biggest regret is that we lost the interview with Jim Marrs when YouTube deleted the Revolution Radio channel. Just there one day, gone the next. But we still have some. We still have some that weren't deleted back from the early days. But yeah, so unfortunately with Jim Marrs, obviously he passed away. We can no longer get that interview back. But I was humbled and delighted to have talked to him and others whom I had only ever listened to or read books, right? I'd never thought in my life that I would get a chance to actually speak to these guys and girls, for that matter. But I did, and it was really quite an experience to be privileged enough to have done this, and that's why I would like to just we're coming to the end of the first hour, but just a couple of moments to think about Nighthawk, who actually put this radio station together, right? It was his baby, his brainchild, and the current admin team is doing a great job of keeping it running. But he started it all. He gave Dave and I a time slot, which we've had for the last 10 years, I think now, and I'll never forget that. I'm always grateful to Nighthawk for giving us that opportunity, and that's what we're trying to make this as entertaining as possible, but also as information rich as possible, because it's nice to have a laugh here and there. That's all good, but I do hope that people walk away from this show and have learned something, or maybe they weren't aware of something, or we were able to shed a light into a dark corner, right? And that's why you should make it into the chat room. Like I said, I'm not in the chat room today, but if you can make it in the chat room, please do. And normally when I'm in there and Dave is in there as well, we interact quite actively with everybody. And in fact, the last 2 weeks ago, we did a show on the Coral Castle, which came directly out of a request from the chat room. Right, somebody in the chat room said, "Hey, can you guys look at the Coral Castle?" So we did, and there was some really interesting stuff, including, which was quite nice and serendipitous, a link to Tesla potentially, which was the previous show cycle, right? That we did, the Electric Universe and then Tesla. But it's really an amazing privilege to be able to talk to you all, and hopefully, like I said, shine a little light on some of the dark corners that we experience every day. But it's really critical, and I want to really make this very clear. It's really critical that everybody understands where we have been, why we are where we are, and where we are likely to go. You must understand your history. You must understand how these things hang together, and you must find out for yourself, right? Dave and I might tell you some things, and that's great, and they might be new to you, but you shouldn't just take our word for it, right? You should still go out there and do your own research. And and in fact, write to us, or send us a message, or come into the chat room and ask us if you want us to look at something in particular, some specific topic you want to have looked at. We've got quite a catalog now over the last 10 years of topics, so you can go to our YouTube channel or go to the Freedom Slips archives to check it out. But if there's a topic we haven't addressed yet, we'd be more than happy to remedy that and investigate and do some research and see what we can find. Because it's fun. It's important. And at the end of the day, we all have to make a living. We all have to make a crust. And I don't know what you do for a living. I'm in the corporate world, right? So I'm part of the problem from a work perspective, the way I see it. I do the best I can. I try to do as good a job with the people that I work with as I can to make their life as good as I can at work. But I'm not curing cancer. Okay, I'm not fighting fires. None of that, right? I'm a corporate operator. So having this show is my way of doing something more meaningful than that. Of course, I have to put bread on the table for my family. That's where the meaning of my job is. I mean, I have to get paid, right? So the paycheck is the ultimate meaning for me in my job. But this is more, hopefully touches more people. Hopefully one day my children might come across this on YouTube and see their father having had this show and having raised these topics. So, some I might be proven to be completely wrong, and boneheaded about, but that's okay. Others, we might find that maybe David Mackey were onto something here. And that's good enough for me, right? If that's a legacy I can leave. It also helps me write my book, which I've been working on for forever now. But I am getting closer. I've got a few chapters ready. And hopefully one or two of you might find the time to buy it. Dave as well has written a book, just to let everybody know. You can find it on Amazon, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but he can tell you about that next time. And there are quite a few accomplished authors on the station anyway, right? Which brings me back to the station here. Nighthawk has managed to bring together a very eclectic group of people to put forward information which is not given to you through a lobbyist's lens or a corporate agenda, but just information. Again, we might get things wrong, sure, right? But we'll tell you. If someone pulls it up, you get to, oh, sorry, I'll bet it's wrong. This is what it actually is. Okay, and we will give you a narrative collectively on Revolution Radio, and that will be quite different from the mainstream media. Don't make no mistake, that media is still important. Just even if you just look at it for to get a feel for the pulse of things. And if you look at the stories they let you have, that tells you a lot about the world they want you to believe exists. Okay, and the stories they don't let you have tells you a lot as well. It's really very telling. Try to be as broad as you can in your view of the world. Try to include as many sources as you can to be an educated citizen of the planet, to be fully enfranchised and understand. Make the right choices too, right? Don't blindly follow someone, right? And one thing that I really find disturbing are inherited opinions. Sometimes you might just agree with something. That's cool. If it's something worth mentioning, absolutely. It could be someone's opinion, but you go, hey, this makes sense to me. All right, it makes sense to me because blah, right? Great. But if someone just says something because someone else said it, they think should know what they're talking about, it's a bit dangerous, right? I also don't like people that inherit their philosophy. What do I mean by that? We're all born into this world naked and like a blank piece of paper. We know nothing. We know everything we know, everything we do, we have to be taught, right? Racism. No child in this world is born a racist. No child in this world is born homophobic. No child in this world is born, agnostic, atheist, fundamentalist. None of that. Not a one. We might have leanings and certain character, traits that might make us lean in that direction, sure enough. But we have to teach our children all of these things. Make yourself aware of when that happens and when you do it to your children. What are you teaching them? My children are at an age where they ask me, "Oh, what are we? What do you believe, Dad? What do you believe? Is there a God? What is a God? Which God?" right? And so I'm honest. I tell them what I believe. I won't bore you with it. Hey, listen to the hypothesis and you'll find out what I believe. But these are good questions for children to ask. Like it's Easter, right? And part of the family that that we're part of is Catholic, and they go to church. And they say, "Oh, why are they going to church?" Well, because they believe this is what happened and that's what happened. Oh, okay. Why is there an Easter rabbit and eggs? What do they have to do with Jesus? Well, the answer is nothing. Okay, it's the memory of a pagan fertility festival, because in the northern hemisphere, this is springtime. It's the time of renewal, rebirth, right? Fertility, growth, etc., etc. So the pagans, if you want to call them that, the people before before the coming of the monotheistic religions, were very much connected to the land, to the world, and to nature, and they celebrated that way. And then as the monotheistic religions came through, they took on some of those facets. Same with Christmas, right? And I tell my kids are 5 and 7. Will they understand everything I say? No, they won't. But I want to give them a platform from which they can think for themselves. I don't want to just tell them stuff and then this is what it is. I'll give them the facts. Well, this is what actually happened in history, in the world, right? I mean, some of it you will remember, some of it you won't. That's okay, but at least there's another story here. And then you can go ahead and do that. Whereas if you're born into a family or a house where that kind of discussion is not present, you can't have it. I think that's a crime. I think it's a terrible crime. We should always encourage our children to ask questions. Yeah, even if it's just to shatter the status quo and get you out of your comfort zone. Right? Why is this happening? Why is that the way it is? Why do we do things like that over there? Why are people starving in the world, Papa? Why isn't there enough food? No, there's enough food. But if we give food away, then the people that are in power think they'll lose money. But that's wrong, Papa. My children say, yeah, it's wrong. But that's the world. Okay, so we should not look at the world through rose-colored glasses, but we should see it for what it is. Not as a pessimist, but as a realist. You have to be a realist. You have to look at the news. You have to understand the situation, because you yourself need to make all the right choices for you and your family and your friends. All right, and if you know what's coming, right, then you're much better prepared. A lot of Jews prior to World War II, between in the 1930s, late 1920s, early to mid 1930s, they didn't think that things would get as bad. Kristallnacht, which was in 1938, that was when they smashed all the Jewish shopfronts. That was sort of a wake-up call, and I believe a lot of the European Jews thought, "Oh my God, this is bad. It is really bad." Right, but at that point it was too late for some to actually flee. Some got away, some people got away. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people still didn't believe it could be that bad. Because make no mistake, in World War I, Jewish people fought on the German side in the trenches against the French and the English. All right, just as a German Christian would have. So for them, it was completely unthinkable that this nation for which they had bled would turn on them this way. But it did, right? Because it was just, again, like today. Oh, the government would never do this. I talk about the pandemic. Oh, the government would never do this. 9/11. Oh, the government would never do this. Yes, they would. In a heartbeat. That's the government. Now think about the actual elite that sits in the invisible tower, if you will, right? That we never see. They'll do whatever it takes. Wholesale genocide. Cleanse the earth. Thank you very much. Start again. The earth is a parkland. And there's the music. So this is Listener Fun Radio, everybody. I'll be back with the pandemic and some other things, microbiological warfare, microbiologist death, etc. So don't go away. It's a short break. Donate if you can. This is the Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio.